Hello, this is Property Matters, a weekly catch-up on all matters property, supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. And we're live every Sunday from 10 a.m. on YouTube, Facebook and our website, propertymatterstv.co.uk. And if you're watching on our website, don't forget to hit the Google review button and give us a review on our homepage there. You can also leave your comments in the comments section if you're watching us on social media. Don't forget to do that, and also email us if you'd like to get in touch. hello@propertymatters.co.uk. Property Matters is also available as a podcast. That's available every Monday at 10 o'clock on the platforms that you can see over there on the side of the screen. And you're welcome to pick that up. And you can also hear us on Dilsey Radio as well. So let's look at this week's property news with our expert. It's Joe Joshi. Hi, Joe.
Yes, hello, good morning. Good morning, everybody, to all our viewers and our listeners, of course. I have to start with an apology. The apology is that I may be having a coughing fit after losing my voice for about a week. So just be warned about the odd burst of cough. But on a nice sunny bank holiday, we are here, as always, week in, week out, giving you an update on what's going on in the property world.
Indeed we are, and we haven't looked at sort of stats for a while, Joe, and you know it's one of my favourite things to do anyway. So let's just have a look and see how the first quarter of 2023 has gone. This is the data to the end of March. So it's a little bit out of date, but it's interesting to see because obviously doing a year-on-year comparison, we were in heady times a year ago with situations like stamp duty, holidays, that kind of thing. And people were still rushing for the race for space, etc. So we did have a phenomenal time. But increases in house prices are still going on, believe it or not, despite everything that we talk about every week. 4.1% in the 12 months to March 2023, meaning £11,000 has gone on the typical home. Now the average property stands at £285,000. However, on a monthly basis, prices have fallen for the fourth consecutive time, decreasing 1.2% in March 23, followed by a slight drop of 0.1% in February. The annual growth rate has slowed down from 5.8% in the year to February, according to Office of National Statistics. It's also a sharp fall in annual growth compared to the recent peak in July 2022, when house prices increased 14.3% over a year ago. Experts said what happens next to property prices would be influenced by the what happens to the rate of inflation, which of course has a major effect on what people pay on their mortgages. Last week it was also announced that the CPI inflation rate fell from 10.1%, of course, to 8.7%, but that still doesn't seem to be enough to encourage the Bank of England not to continue to put further rate rises up. The suggestion is 4.75 next month, isn't it, Joe? So they were heady days a year ago, 14.3% growth in a year. Now we're down to 4.1. So still on the upward trajectory, just.
Yes, I mean, I know you love your statistics. At the end of the day, statistics actually exist on the basis of that's what people will go by, especially governments and lenders and generally people in the marketplace. Because if things are working in the right way, then of course they feel comfortable and confident that they want to be part of that success story. And right now, even though we had the success story in the property side of it through the pandemic, though the pandemic itself was not a particularly good success story for most people, but the house prices and the prices itself and the property market itself did very well. Now the problem we have now is that there's always going to be a little bit of a correction. People say it's house prices are falling. I say it's a correction because when things are really positive and it becomes a seller's market, then of course the market is going to be running away with itself because people are getting best prices, and in a particular area you might find that one house sells for a certain and the next one sells for a bit more and so forth, because it's a supply and demand thing. But now what you're seeing is that the demand is slightly lower, primarily because of the interest rates that have gone up and obviously inflation and other factors that have actually allowed people to put a brake on their possible move. So it's now become what we call a buyer's market. And that has two things that are a plus and a minus. And the minus is, of course, that you're going to find a lot of buy-to-let people are now coming out because it's just too expensive for them to maintain that. Interest rates are so high that the income from their rental from previous tenants is probably not sufficient to cover the existing mortgage increases that they've got. So they've got to take a view that they've got to get out of that. Of course, the government isn't helping that, and the government is actually shooting itself in the foot by doing those things, because there's going to be lesser properties available to rent for people. The other side of the coin is that it's a great opportunity for first-time buyers, because now that the investor market is off the scale, it really is open for the first-time buyers to go in there and make their best bids and say, right, here is a property. First of all, they might have a choice, which is a good thing. So even new developments are offering really good deals to first-time buyers. And of course, first-time buyers are being offered some interesting new mortgage products, which are encouraging them to consider, even though the rates are higher. So yes, the house prices may have seen a dip in sort of month to month for the last 3 or 4 months, but what it hasn't seen is a dip across the board. And it really firms up my belief, and something that I've always said, that you can't beat putting your investment and buying bricks and mortar and buying your first home.
I've, as part of doing this show, I'm in a number of property groups on Facebook, and it's fascinating how vocal everybody is in those groups. And people are showing the sort of levels they're paying for a sort of 1 and 2 bedroom places. So, anything from £700 to £1,500 for a maybe 2 bedroom flat, for example. And what's interesting in that conversation so often comes out is the fact that many of these renters, and because rents are rising so fast because there's just no supply, you've got something, I think it was something like 13 people going for each particular flat, whereas only 3 people looking at a place to sell that's for sale. And the thing is that actually many of these people now are in this curious situation that they could more easily afford to buy on a monthly basis than they can to rent. It's cheaper. It's always been cheaper to buy, allegedly, but most of the time. But the point is that they can't seem to be able to get the mortgage in the first place because the qualification levels are so high that they don't actually pass the income test in the first place. But their actual monthly outgoings would be less if they were able to purchase than if they're renting.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. It's now become a buyer's market, so the first-time buyers are there. One of the things that first-time buyers or any buyer should really consider at this point, especially when they're trying to reach the amount or the idea of them being able to borrow, cost of living and all those things accounted for, is that if necessary, it's not just a 1 person, 2 person, 3 or 4 people can actually pull together. I think it's certainly up to 4 people can pull together their resources and get on that ladder. So it might mean that you might buy a house with 3 or 4 of you, whereas you've got a 3 or 4 bedroom house, and you could almost literally have a bedroom each, and that in its mortgage cost would probably cost you less than what you would go and pay or rent a whole house for. So people must bear in mind that there are other ways to deal with this. Yes, of course, if you're a couple or your income is on your own and you can afford to do the whole thing by yourself, you're going to do it. But what I'm going to say is that talk to your mortgage brokers, take advice, get some guidance, and there is no reason why 4 people, up to 4 people, cannot be part of a mortgage application, which then covers the affordability factor. So the message I would give is, whatever it takes, get on the ladder. As you are on it, you can always come off of those mortgages and onto your own separate things once the equity starts to build in the property. So if you bought a house or a flat or whatever, let's say I use 100,000 as a benchmark for this discussion, and then that's gone up to 150,000 pounds. 2 of you could come out of that quite easily and say, right, okay, well, the 2 are going to stay and the other 2 are going to go and buy their own, and out the equity increase, we can offer them something towards their deposit on their own property. And actually, before buy-to-let came into this whole sphere, Paul, that's how people did it. Back in the days, back 40 odd years ago, you didn't have buy-to-let mortgages. So what people used to do is buy as a group and then come off of it one by one and provide the deposit. But you had to be in it to win it. You had to be in the first one in order for it to actually increase in price so that you could release it or refinance it and give some of that equity to the other person, because they were actually going up in value quicker and and more than you were going to save. So you were never going to save on a 25, 30,000 pound income, whatever that income might have been X, Y, Z years ago, and then find that you found the deposit. So the only way to do it was to become part of a cluster or a group who then bought something together. Now, of course, the challenge with those things is about getting on, and saying to yourself, I'm getting on with the four people. But if it's just a business deal, then everything is possible to do.
A general reaction in the industry is the fact that people are finally crawling out from under the shell shock of the infamous mini budget that came out last October, I believe. But a lot of the agents are saying that actually now, especially in the home counties, that the levels of inquiries and the levels of properties up for sale are roughly corresponding to where we were in 2018, 2019. And in many respects, there's no point in making comparisons to 2020 and 2021 because they were extraordinary peaks because of an extraordinary situation, and obviously stamp duty, holidays, that kind of thing. So they're saying we're back to a more balanced market now. Certainly in London, they're saying that viewings are up 17% and that they actually think London's prospects in 2023 will be better than everybody expected. So they're also saying that motivated sellers are realising they've got to be keen to negotiate a reduction, but they are getting the activity and they are getting the offers as long as they're prepared to be a bit more flexible. And again, for sellers, that means be mindful of making a decent offer.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and the analysis that are being offered is truly to the point where the time during the pandemic was an extraordinary time. But when you come out of the city, out of London, a lot of the moves are for different reasons. We had the race for space during that period, so everybody wanted to get out of London and have the fresh air and be away from people and have the space around them and all that kind of stuff. But what you got to bear in mind is that when people are moving outside of London, they are moving for other reasons. For example, schooling. It might be that their children are now going to go to a specific school and they need to move to try and get into that area, that catchment area. Jobs is one thing, age is another. So if somebody might downsize, they might think, well, actually, this is too big for me. I need to maybe move out. Family, health is a huge thing. A massive thing, actually, the underlining about health and family. Though during the whole lifetime cycle, you might say, well, actually, it doesn't really matter. My family's here, my family's there. But if you then decide, or you are not well, or you want to be near grandchildren, or you want to do all those other things, those are the reasons that actually, so therefore the activity is a flow on general life itself. It's not about the race for space. It's not about, I've got to get onto this particular property. Is what I call a social move. It's a domestic move. It could be that you've gone through a separation. There's a whole bunch of reasons that makes those people. Whereas the moves that come out and happen in London, for example, are a international move. It's everything and everyone. It could be a job. It could be that you're studying in London. It could be that you're transporting in. It could be that you have a wealthy person in another country and the security of your family is more important. So you end up buying a place in London and know that there is a better security than there is perhaps in some of the other countries. So there are different reasons why people move in. However, as it grows out, you have the maximum benefit of the prices that have increased in places like London. That might give you the benefit of the opportunity to buy in other areas.
We often talk about the first-time buyers and getting onto the property ladder, but we don't often talk about the top end of the market. It's interesting what one industry professional was saying this week, saying that when you look at the mid to high-end, sort of 4-5 bedroom family-type properties, actually the prices are anchored in quite well because that's where the real lack of supply is at the moment. Yes, there's more homes coming up for sale, but they're not in that crucial family home size, let's call it, area of the market. And typically these are attracting older cash buyers, of course, who are less dependent on financing their move. And where the property is a proper, decent well maintained, well looked after, well developed property, there's still quite a lot of competition and therefore solidifying of prices.
Yes, I mean the competition. Look, the bigger homes the system in the UK is such that it's like a progression pool. So yes, you get the first time buyers. Without the first time buyer, that run of the ladder doesn't work all the way to the top. You need somebody at the bottom. So that was coupled and probably slightly unfortunate with the number of investors that came in. And the investors that came into that bottom end of the market was primarily because they had no other source or no other area to invest their money in that make them feel safer. So when you've got a situation like now where the investors are not investing anymore because it's too expensive to invest, this is the window for the opportunity for the first time buyer. But the first time buyer starts to buy, then everybody moves up the ladder. So for example, let's say that the process is you might start, and we'll start with this, you might start with a studio for argument sake, and then you've outgrown a studio, you go to a one bedroom, you've outgrown a one bedroom, you might have got together with somebody, you're now going to have two bedrooms, and the next step's going to be a terrace or an end of terrace house, then to a semi-detached, a small detached, middle detached, and then of course your £1 million plus mansion and so forth. So that's the process that would normally go. But it doesn't exist without the first time buyer because we need to get up onto that ladder. And the people at the top may have had enough equity or they're downsizing so they are able to buy cash. And that then puts that market at the top a little bit wobbly because it opens it for two people. One is the chain people, that the chains are going up, and the others are that got money themselves who don't need to go and borrow, can afford to buy. So then that market is starved a little bit at the top.
Be interesting to see what happens with the market with inflation, and I think you did say this on the program a few weeks ago. Things go up, but they never seem to come down to back where they were again. And now we're hearing that the energy price cap is falling, but not by as much as people thought. Prices are not coming down as much. They may stay quite high for a long time. Rates are going to stay up at this sort of level, 4.5% to 5% for good 2 or 3 years. It's being predicted now, whereas we thought we'd get it back down. Government was saying 6 months ago that they were going to halve inflation in a year. That doesn't look like happening. So if we continue on this way, then how do you think that's going to affect? Because we're coming into the popular time now, the summer months. Good time to sell your property, good time to get things on the market. I suppose really from that point of view, probably to get it better to get it on now rather than wait and see what happens.
Well, I mean, currently this year of 23, and especially this last month, including this weekend, has been absolutely bombarded with nothing but bank holidays, and those things are actually a detriment to everything else, and combined with children off. So that the process, people are not interested in getting involved in property as such. But traditionally, this is the best time to sell because obviously the gardens are looking great, the flowers are out, you've got longer days, it's lighter. Properties should look their best, though I can tell you they don't, because people actually forget that it's the outside part, the front part, the appearance, the first 10 seconds of somebody turning up your house is probably more important than finding that you've got a poke and pole kitchen inside, which they're only going to get to if they get past the first part. And so, this is the right time to sell. There's no question about that. And of course, the problem we have now is the continuous increase of interest rates and, of course, the energy prices. They are not going to come down a great deal. You have to remember, and I think that we were always poised, that we knew that interest rates will go up at some point. They were at a certain point. They were so low, they brought them to such a level. We knew that. But what we were not prepared for, and that's where the big fall is. What we were not prepared for was all of the other add-ons that have happened: the energy prices, the gas, the electric, the rates, and the cost of shopping, for example, food shopping itself. All of those things were things that we probably didn't bargain for. And now, coupled with that and interest rates, of course, that's made it really, really tough and challenging for every family, every individual and family, and everybody's got to watch their pennies the best they can to make sure they get through that. But the chances of those things coming down dramatically again in the future is not very high. So you have to get used to it. And when you look back, it's a bit like somebody says, the pandemic was there. We lived through it, we saw it, and today most people have, to a large extent, apart from those that may have lost loved ones and have other feelings, the general consensus of pandemic has kind of like is behind us. We're like, oh yeah, but that was then. Now's now. And that's exactly probably where we'll end up going with interest rates. As time goes on, you'll get used to it, and you'll get that. And they know that. The governments know that, and they use that as a yardstick every time.
The old problems still remain. They're saying here in one particular instance that those properties 1.5 million and above, they're going under offer on average every 3 weeks, or it's taking just 3 weeks to get sold. But they've never seen transactions take so long, as the exchange process just gets slower and slower. And there's no excuse for it, really, because we're not, yes, there are still people working from home, but the truth of the matter is that, the pandemic's over. There's no issues, or there shouldn't be. So still the old adage of conveyancing, we know it's stuck in the 1880s and hasn't grown up since or got any more modernised, but it seems to be getting worse, not better, doesn't it, Joe?
It's you know me, I'll get on my soapbox on that one, so it's better for me to move on to another subject. It's just so archaic. It's ridiculous to think that a simple transaction can take so long. And what people don't remember in that journey, people lose things. They lose. I had a client, to give you an example, I had a client this week who said to me, he finally got his mortgage offer. He started his mortgage application 6 months ago, Paul. Right? He got a mortgage offer, and the mortgage offer says, you take this mortgage by the 10th of June or it's gone. So he's just got it, and it's valid for 15 days. For 15 days, which used to be valid for 3 months minimum. Now it's valid for 15 days. So if you don't take up that mortgage, that offer that they've given you in the next 15 days, which has taken you 6 months to get in the first place, and you've lost potentially 2 or 3 other properties that you could have bought, let alone the conveyancing. We haven't even started on the conveyancing. So if you had to have that mortgage taken up in 15 days, I have no idea what the conveyancer would do at that point to get it done to that speed when it's taken nearly 6 months on a normal transaction. So yeah, it's very archaic and very slow indeed, and doesn't help.
No,
I think we got a comment. Are we on there?
Yes, I think this is actually Guy. I think saying good morning, gents.
Okay. Good morning,
so
Guy.
I think it's Guy. Yes. Let's have a look. I think that's it. I don't know why it's coming up Facebook user. We shall have to look into that and see why that is. It's probably something this end, I would imagine. But morning, I think that's Guy. So let's move on to our second story, which is not that one. Let's move on to our second story. Here we are. And this is interesting because it talks about, we've talked a lot about Mr. Gove and his attitude towards landlords, and I can see why they're focusing on the negative side. We look at this story here today, and actually this story is about, when the relationship is good, both sides, landlords and tenants, are prepared to be reasonable. But then you get a story like I didn't feature in the programme today, but the headline was, housing raid finds tenants squeezed into a squalid 3-bed slum. Enforcement officers and police found 11 people crammed into a mouldy, dangerous, semi-detached 3-bed property. So that's the kind of thing they're focusing on, and that's what they're trying to stamp out. But I think realistically, for every one of those, there's probably 10 or 20 where the relationship is a lot more healthy, and so on. So in here, in this story, more than a third of all tenants could both renew their contract, or would both renew their contract and accept a rent increase as long as they had a positive relationship. This is new U-Switch research. However, according to the same survey, 50% of tenants would renew as a result of a positive landlord relationship, but wouldn't also accept a rent increase. I suppose that's inevitable, they'd say that. Only 1 in 10 said they would neither renew their contract nor accept an increase in rent. Research found that the 18 to 24 age group had the lowest percentage of tenants willing to base both of their rental decisions on landlord-tenant relationships, at just over a quarter at 26%. However, this age group gave the second highest vote to the option of renewing without an increase, only narrowly behind the peers of 25-34, who gave 54% of their vote on this option. So this is it here. So you can see here the 1824s, 13% would not renew and would not accept an increase. 53 said that yes, they would renew without an increase. 8% would not renew, but they would also agree an increase. So presumably if they went somewhere else for more money. And then 26% yes, they would increase, and yes, they would renew. And you look down at the 55-year-olds, you can see that figure, yes, we'd renew with a good relationship, yes, we'd increase, was 44%. So I suppose that comes with an element of maturity, doesn't it, Joe? Because, you know, the older generation said, well, do you know what? Actually, I cherish the relationship I have with my landlord because it could be a lot worse somewhere else.
I think all of those age groups is a good analysis to offer therefore, and it's going to break them down. So the 18 to 24 are more volatile and moving. They are moving people. They're moving targets. They are here today, and they're probably going to go to another city or another job or another circumstance. So they are, you know, they're not sort of longevity people. They will move. So subsequently, they won't increase or renew because there might be a job change, and they might be going somewhere else, or they might have partnered up with somebody. So there's a lot more fluidity there. And as you go up the ranks there, and people look at the people like the sort of the 45, 50, 54 and plus are more stable. They've come to a point of life where they, you know, don't particularly want change a great deal. They want to be moving every 6 months and so forth. And their relationship normally with the landlords are long and perhaps a bit more conversational than there are with the younger one. The other thing with the younger ones is, of course, it might be that they don't want to move, but they have to move because they may have, you know, not got on with their neighbours, or they've got, you know, boy racer cars, all sorts of other things that come into these sort of decisions will determine whether the longevity of it happens. But the interesting thing is that, of course, the rental prices are colossal now, and so therefore the only ones that can perhaps sustain that are the sort of the 50 pluses, either from the sale or equity of properties that they may have sold, or income that they've got, or sufficient pension plans, etc., that give them more income, more disposable income to be able to continue to, you know, pay the rents or the higher rents.
This is the element of the story that I really wanted to get to. It's just interesting to see that generational difference, Joe. But these are the values that people hold important in that landlord and tenant relationships. Quite interesting. So for both tenants and landlords, communication between the two for both sides was the most important thing. 71% for tenants, so that suggests that they are craving more contact with their landlord, better contact with their landlord. 51%, still more than half, said yes, I want to be able to communicate with the tenant. And honesty then comes second, and that's a bigger one even for the tenants than it is for the landlords, which suggests that the tenants feel that they're more aggrieved in the relationship than the landlords are. Upkeep of the property, really important for the tenants, more important, interestingly, than from the landlord's point of view, which is surprising from my perspective. And abiding to the terms and conditions of the contract. So again, interestingly, more important for the tenants than the landlords. I would have thought that would have been the other way around. And being aware of your responsibilities, tenants 51% and landlords 41%. But I mean, that's an interesting set of priorities, 5 priorities there for a good rental arrangement. Any comment on that, Joe, or anything you might add to that list of 5?
I would say that communication is definitely the right one to be at the top. There's no question about that, because everything about any tenancy and landlord is about communication. The reason communications tend to break down is probably because of the number 2, and that's the honesty. And whether that's the honesty on part of the landlord or the honesty on may have come into a property giving certain reasons of what they are, and they actually end up being something completely different, and that then causes a problem for the landlord, and that's where communication tends to break down. So those two at the top. The rest of them are important, but I think if you have communication and some sort of integrity, honesty within that relationship, then that's more than 50% of the reason why you're going to get on. It also means the continuation of the rent money is coming in on time, providing the landlord is delivering the things that they are supposed to deliver, especially if they made a promise and doing certain things to the property, or they need to be updated and kept. On the other hand, Paul, I have to say that it is so infuriating that sometimes the tenants can become picky for the most feeble, ridiculously silly little things that then annoys the landlord. For example, somebody will turn around and say, well, actually, there's 3 bulbs that are not working in the house. Well, go to the supermarket and buy 3 bulbs. But, they will continue to moan about the fact that the landlord hasn't come over and changed the 3 bulbs. Well, I always find, and that's a really extreme example, but I'm using that as an example, that sometimes there's trivial and there's silly little things like that then become big things just because it's now become a communication issue. The landlord saying, I haven't physically got time, I've got to get someone over there, drive someone there, go to the supermarket, buy. You go to the supermarket every week to your shop, buy 3 bulbs and put them in. So it's just that sometimes those relationships can be wrong for the wrong reasons.
Interesting comment from Guy here. Guy saying younger tenants under 24 are more likely to move for their careers and lifestyle changes. There are less tenants now who realistically aspire to moving to home ownership, so we're seeing more long-term tenancies. I suppose that is true. Under 24s are going to be moving around. They're going to be much more mobile than over 55s, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I tend to agree with Guy. I said that same thing, that at that age there is so much fluidity going on that it might be a job, it might be relationship, it might be whatever those scenarios would happen. There's going to be more movement happening, and people may take a 12-month contract and be gone in 6 months because all of a sudden they've managed to get themselves a job in some other part of the country or another country as well. And likewise, coming in, you'll find that people come into the country, take a rental, and find that their circumstances have changed and they're going to be packing their bags and off they go again in 6 months' time. So yeah, that bottom tier will always be far more fluid than perhaps the top tier would be.
Interesting story. I thought we'd just touch on that and just look at those 5 priorities, but always saving the best till last, of course. Here's the reveal for the week, and that is, where's the hottest places to buy property right now? So let's have a look at this one, shall we? The UK property market has witnessed 250 billion worth of property sales over the past year. So 250 billion's worth of sales, despite things going the wrong way. With the richest local market being north of Scottish border, according to analysis by Nested. The study examined a total volume of combined value of property sales in the UK in the last 12 months, shedding light on how the market has responded to recent economic uncertainties and revealing the country's wealthiest local markets. Within the past year, a total of, get this, 869,560 homes were sold. So nearly 900,000 homes were sold, amounting to a combined value of 2.49 billion. So that's 2.49.7. So that's nearly 250 billion. These figures represent a decline of 23.5% in sales volume compared to the previous year, resulting in a cumulative value drop of 16.3%. This decline occurred despite a 9.5% increase in house prices during the same period. Edinburgh emerged as the most valuable local property market over the last 12 months, with 11,295 completed sales, amounting to 3.7 billion, followed closely by Buckinghamshire, where sales reached 3.4 billion, and Wandsworth in southwest London, total of 3 billion worth of sales. But it's interesting, isn't it? But they will top the market because those are expensive places to buy in the first place.
Yes, I mean, Buckinghamshire and, of course, Edinburgh and Wandsworth being in London are all, expensive areas that people are going to be buying and moving to. Stockbroker belt just outside London, so schooling is important, communication is important. So those are always going to be relatively good hotspots in and around the biggest cities. And then, of course, you'll always find other hotspots where people are perhaps retiring to and moving towards the coast. And some of the coastal ones will become an area that, where there's a lot of transaction. But in spite of what's happened in the marketplace, it's amazing to see the amount of number of transactions and the value, the actual value of properties that has taken and sales have happened on is quite surprising considering where everybody says the market is.
Other notable regions that you could invest in: Kensington and Chelsea, no surprise there. Cornwall, of course. Somerset, okay. Belfast, interestingly. Wiltshire. But the one that really caught my eye was Yorkshire. 2.5 billions worth of sales. People looking to move to Yorkshire.
Yeah, Yorkshire is very popular actually itself. And the area is an area of culture and interest, and there's a lot of people that tend to shift up to Yorkshire. But in a way, it's a bit of a London. We like to think that places like Birmingham, Manchester, and Leeds, and those type of areas, Liverpool, might be more cosmopolitan and a lot more chimney pots. But people tend to move towards places like Yorkshire for the country life, for the other aspects of it. And so Yorkshire is a very popular northern city for where people want to move to. But it just goes to show, even with the current property market the way it is, the hotspots are still there, and the people are still moving and want to move to those particular locations. Looking at your statistics that you're putting out today, Paul.
On the other side of things, places where they're not getting so much growth is Merthyr Tydfil and Blaenau Gwent in Wales. They're identified as the least valuable areas in the UK. I suppose you could look at that the other way, Joe, and say, well, that's where I'm going to find the biggest bargains. And if I'm an investor, maybe I should go and look there. Just 109 million and 122 million's worth of sales prospectively for each of those. So, I mean, would you say? But you've always said, haven't you, Joe, that if you don't live near there, then you shouldn't buy something just because it's a cheap area and then live 200 miles from it.
As an investor, yes, I've always said that you should take a time span. My time span suggestion is 45 minutes. I'm sure someone like Guy will either endorse or help me cover that. And the reason I say that is that if you buy something that is within 45 minutes of reach, you can do your day in the transaction can happen in half a day. So, for example, let's say there was a leaky tap and you had to go out and get it fixed, and it had to be done at within 45 minutes. You could probably get there, get your plumber or whatever, get back, and you can get back in half a day. Once it's an hour, it's a whole day. And now that 15 minutes may, sound really silly, but those parents that do school runs in the morning will know that if they hit the road at a certain time, the chances are they'll sail straight through to the front of the gate of the school. And about 5 minutes later, you're just going to sit in traffic and get there later than that is. It's because everybody does the same thing in a certain way. So I've always suggested that those that are investing, looking to buy in further areas, must take time into consideration. We know that for a fact, and the reason we know that is that I've had recent instructions where people have had owned properties 4 or 5 hours away, and they've not been there. They've never been there, because to them it's like, what am I going to do? I've got to drive all the way up there, look at it, and drive all the way back. So they just don't go there. But the idea of buying something at, £150,000 or whatever they might buy there actually is good at the time, but becomes expensive because you've got to put a value on your time. Time is money. And so if you've gone all the way there and find that, I had a story I can tell you of a guy who bought a property with tenants. It was a commercial property, and all he did is look at the legal pack, did all the leases, etc., etc. Thought he'd bought himself a bargain, good return of investment, and found that he wasn't getting the income. And then 6 months later, after he'd bought it, he thought, I'd better go up there and find out what's going on. And of course, what he found was that there was nobody ever there at all, and the shutters were down. and it was all ripped out, and there was nobody there at all. But somehow someone had created all the documents to make it happen. So, I would always say, if you're going to go and buy anything further than 45 minutes, make sure you've allowed for that in your whole calculation of time.
So, just to come back to the previous story, Guy says, I was taught back in 1980, Mr. Agent, my Hoover is not working. Means the bag is full. Please come round and replace it.
I rest my case. Thank you, Guy. That's exactly the point I was trying to make with the bulbs. But yes, it really is silly, and that is where the communication breaks down.
Yeah, he also says he doesn't agree with your last comment. He says, because I've got property in the UK and I'm 6,000 miles away.
Yes.
Nice one, Guy. Thank you. And on that bombshell, I think we should leave it there this week, Joe. We are fast out of time. Our time just goes so quickly on a Sunday. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you to Guy for his contributions as well. Lovely to speak to you all live, and I hope you enjoyed today's show and got something from it. That's why we're here. And we'll be here again this time next week.